In this video, we will show you how to simulate polymerase chain reaction, PCR, on Mendelgen. PCR, through the use of a DNA template, primers, DNTPs, and a DNA polymerase, exponentially amplify a specific region of DNA. This is done by running many cycles of a three-step process, each cycle doubling the amount of DNA in the previous cycle. The steps in each cycle are as follows. In the first step, the double-stranded DNA template is denatured so it becomes single-stranded. In the second step, the primers anneal to the single strands through complementary base pairing. In the final step, the DNA polymerase extends the primers using the DNTPs to create double-stranded DNA from the single strands. Following the diagram, we can easily see how the amount of DNA for the specific region between the primers exponentially increases. Now, let's switch to Mendelgen and show you how this can be simulated. The first step in the PCR simulation on Mendelgen is to select a vector from your library that you'd like to use as the DNA template. Now, this vector in my library, called PGL3 Basic Ori Primers, is a vector that I've pre-constructed that identifies primer locations in order to make this tutorial more simple. So I'm going to use this vector as my DNA template, so I'm going to click on it. This will then open the Mendelgen editor with the DNA template on the left in a circular map and on the right in a sequence map. Now, before we begin the PCR simulation, I want to show you what I would like to accomplish. So in the DNA template over here, we have this feature Ori shown in the blue arrow. I would like to amplify just this region. Now, as I described earlier, in order to do this, I need a forward primer before Ori, and I need a reverse primer after. Now, I'm going to click on Ori in the circular map here, which will then give us a better view in the sequence map. Okay, so as you can see here, I've identified the forward primer. Right here, I've labeled as forward Ori. And if we scroll down, we have a reverse primer labeled reverse Ori. Now, the PCR simulation is going to amplify the region between the beginning of the forward primer and the end of the reverse primer. Okay, so that's what we want to accomplish. Let's go ahead and start the simulation. In order to do that, I'm going to go over to Tools in the menu here and click on it and get a drop-down. In the drop-down, I'm going to select PCR. This is then going to open a PCR tab right here and a panel below showing all the steps that need to be completed before we run the PCR simulation. Now, the first step has already been completed because our DNA template is simply the vector in the viewer. So moving to the second step, we have to specify our primers. This can be done in two ways. Either we have to select existing primers. These are primers that have been pre-uploaded into our DNA template, or we can enter a brand new primer sequence. As I've said earlier, I already have uploaded the primers I want to use, but I'll go ahead and go through enter primer sequences with you to show you if you'd like to do it that way. So start by clicking enter primer sequences. Then in this section, first you have to enter the primer name. I'm going to enter test as an example. Then you have to enter the new primer sequence. Now remember, this primer is for the DNA template, so the primer sequence must match a region within the DNA template. I'm going to enter ACTG. Also, don't worry, like if you enter something that doesn't match, like we will let you know. Like say if I enter just GGGG, oh, see, there we go. So pretty much I can't use this sequence because it does not match. So let me go back to where it does match. Okay, so that's fine to use as a new primer sequence. Then you can add an overhang. Now these overhangs are just on the 5' end of the primer. They do not need to match the DNA template, but they will be in the PCR product. I'm going to go ahead and add an overhang just to show you how to do it. So click overhang, or add overhang, and then scroll down and enter your sequence, ACTG again, just as an example. And then if I would like this to be a reverse primer, I'm going to check this box. I do not, so I'll leave it, and it'll be a forward primer. Then I'm going to here, I'll see I provide the length, the orientation, and the melting temperature of the primer I've just entered. Now to use this as the primer, I'll just click Add Primer. And as specified before, I do not actually want to use this primer, so I'll scroll down and click the X under Confirm Primers. Now let me scroll back up, switch over to Select Existing Primer, because as we said before, my primers have been uploaded before. Now under Primer 1, I'll click the drop down. I'll see the two primers that I've pre-uploaded. I'll select Forward Ori, and this then shows the DNA sequence of the primer, the length of the primer, the orientation, which is forward, and the melting temperature. So I'll click Add Primer, and then move to adding our second primer. Now the steps adding the second primer are exactly the same as the first, so I won't show you enter primer sequences again. I'll just go ahead and select a primer that's already been uploaded. So clicking on the drop down, I'll see the two primers. Now I've already used Forward Ori, now I want to use Reverse. So I'll click on Reverse Ori. And again, that shows us the sequence, the length, the orientation, and the melting temperature. So now I've used Forward Ori, so that's before the Ori feature, and now I'm going to use the Reverse, which is after the Ori feature. So I'll click Add Primer, and as we showed earlier, we have Confirm Primers, where we can click this X to remove a primer that we've already selected. I don't want to do that. I would like to use these primers. So then we've finished all the steps preparing for the PCR simulation. All that we have left is to click Simulate PCR. So I'll go ahead and click that. And cool, so our PCR simulation has taken place. Let's look at PCR product on the left to make sure everything worked out correctly. First of all, it's now a linear vector, so I'm going to switch over to linear map. And we see we have the forward primer here on the left, we have Ori in the middle, and we have the reverse primer on the right. Okay, great. So that concludes our tutorial on PCR simulation on Mendelgen. Check out our other videos to see cloning techniques and other functions we provide on Mendelgen.